This week we're taking a look at Matthew chapter 6, verse 34. Let's read it in the ESV. Therefore, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. So this verse comes at the end of a section about cares, worries, anxieties in Matthew chapter 6. Interestingly, Luke chapter 12 has an almost identical section, but it does not have this verse that we get in Matthew 6:34. Luke leaves this part out. So today we're going to take a look at this three-part verse and the sort of interesting implications it has and what it tells us. So let's start out with the first section from Luke 6:34, and here we read, "Me un merimnesete eis tein arion." So it seems like odd counsel on its face, right? Therefore, take no thought for tomorrow, or worry not for tomorrow. What about be ready? Aren't there many times when Jesus tells the disciples to be ready? He doesn't tell them to get ready, he tells them to be ready. And yet here, he says, therefore, take no thought for tomorrow, worry not about tomorrow. So the first thing for us to look at is the second word in the verse, right? So we got me un. Un, the postpositive, always comes after a word, never leads the sentence, but it means therefore. And you've heard me say this many times. When you see the word therefore, you better make sure you know what it's there for, right? It conjoins this verse with what went before. You don't start out with therefore. There had to be something that precedes. It's introducing a conclusion or a summary, or it's opening up the implications of what was said previously, right? So therefore, do not take thought, do not worry about tomorrow. What came before this? The verse immediately before this is the one that says, "Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you." All what things? Well, remember, in the section, it was about don't be worried, don't be pardon me. Don't be worried, don't be anxious about what you're going to eat, what you're going to drink, how you're going to clothe yourself. Don't worry about the basic needs of the day, because the birds of the field don't worry and God provides for them. So then he says, seek first God's kingdom and righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Therefore, don't worry about tomorrow. Don't be anxious about tomorrow. Don't be thinking constantly about tomorrow. The therefore links us back to that. So let's talk about this word merimnesete. So here we get a prohibitive subjunctive. So we get the may plus an aorist tense subjunctive mood verb. It's called the prohibitive subjunctive. It's very common, and it's used in place of an imperative. So an imperative would be, in the aorist, would usually mean stop doing this or don't do that. In the present, it would mean don't keep doing that. Stop continually doing something. But in the subjunctive, we're forbidding the occurrence of something that we're thinking about or talking about rather than something that's actually happening. So it's kind of taking in the hypothetical conversation, the theoretical notion of worrying about tomorrow, and putting a stop to it in advance. Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't keep thinking about tomorrow. Don't be thinking about it. Take no thought for tomorrow. Not that you're doing it now, but theoretically, as a concept, don't take no thought for tomorrow. Let's look at the verb a little more. The verb merimnesete comes from, this is a hard one to pronounce, mimneskomai. And mimneskomai is remembering, but it's more than remembering. It's keeping something in your mind. It's almost being preoccupied with something. So we could think of this verse, the first third of the verse, as don't be preoccupied about tomorrow, right? If you're preoccupied about tomorrow, you're going to miss out on some stuff today. And he's going to tell us there's an even better reason to not be preoccupied about tomorrow. So why should you not be preoccupied about tomorrow? Let's look at section 2. Hagar, Orion, merimnese, heautes. So again, another postpositive, this time not un but gar. For tomorrow, hey Orion, tomorrow, merimnese shall worry. This is a future active indicative third person singular of the same verb. Shall worry, heautes, for itself or about itself. Tomorrow shall worry for itself. Really, tomorrow's going to worry for itself. That seems pretty strange, doesn't it? How so? How will tomorrow worry for itself? He tells us in the third section. He gives us the sort of the full rep on this thing in the third section. Let's take a look. Archeton te hemera he kakia autes. So archeton, sufficient, enough. We've had this as a word of the week previously. Archeton, sufficient, te hemera, in the dative case, for the day. Then we're going to imply is, and we get he kakia, the evil, the bad, the trouble, autes, of itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. Sufficient for the day is its own evil. Each day has enough problems for itself without you borrowing some of tomorrow's problems and troubles and evils into today. That's a pretty fantastic way to look at it. Why should you not be preoccupied with tomorrow? Because tomorrow has its own problems. The problems of each day are sufficient. You've got enough to deal with today without borrowing some of tomorrow's problems and importing them into today. Tomorrow will take care of tomorrow. Tomorrow's got its own problems. Live in the day that you're in. Because really, when you think about it, it's the only one you can live in. But the other reason that it's so important is, remember that therefore. Why is it important for you to not bring tomorrow's troubles into today? Because he told us in verse 33, seek God's kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. If you are planning and plotting for how you're going to deal with tomorrow's problems, you are not seeking God's kingdom and righteousness. You are seeking solutions to problems that aren't here yet, and you are sort of, the big risk is you're putting yourself in control of the situation. You're not counting that God is going to provide all these things to you for all who seek God's kingdom and righteousness. You are counting on your ability and your plan to deal with tomorrow's problems today, right? That's an important part of this thing. Now, at the risk of being a broken record, why does Matthew give us this and Luke doesn't, even though they both give us the section about worry and anxiety? Well, back to Matthew's audience. His audience is primarily a Jewish audience looking at this Jewish Messiah, and their history, their enculturation of their people's story informs this verse powerfully. Okay? Let's go back to Exodus chapter 16, verse 4. This is from the ESV. Then the Lord said to Moses, behold, I am about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day. A day's portion every day, that I may test them whether they will walk in my law or not. So God tells Moses, tell the people there's going to be bread that falls, and they're supposed to each day get enough from me for that day. A day's portion for each day. And in this way, I'll know whether they are obedient to me, whether they're trusting me or not, how they relate to gathering a day's worth of bread each day. Let's go down to verse 20 in the same chapter. But they did not listen to Moses. Some left part of it till the morning, and it bred worms and stank, and Moses was angry with them. So, if they seek God's kingdom and righteousness, what they need will be added to them each day. Everything they need would be provided for them each day. There'll be enough bread, go out and gather enough for today. But if they're worried about tomorrow, if they're preoccupied with tomorrow, if they're borrowing tomorrow's hunger today and keep some back, we're going to gather a little extra for the morning, just in case, just to be sure we've got enough. Everything went rotten. You see the story? You see the implication of the story? Why does Jesus say this last verse, verse 34, at the end of this section? Therefore, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will worry about itself. For sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. Tomorrow has its own problems. Each day has its own problem. But you are not to be preoccupied with the problem. Seek first, primarily, God's kingdom and righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. If you're preoccupied with God's kingdom and righteousness, you don't have to worry about tomorrow's problems. You don't have to worry about today's problems, because all these things shall be added unto you. That's why he tells us. Luke doesn't tell us. Why? Because his audience, noble Theophilus, a Gentile writer writing to a Gentile audience that doesn't have the same inherent connection to the Exodus story, probably doesn't make this connection as readily. You'd have to really spell it out for Theophilus. Some of you out there are saying, but wait, Luke didn't write to the guy that he said he was writing to. Luke was writing to me. Matthew was writing to me. Okay, that may be true in your worldview, in your theology, etc. But then I need you to figure out why there's a difference in the way the two men wrote the accounts. I'm positing to you that their audience dictates how they chose to communicate the story about Jesus in the most effective way that they could. Therefore, do not be anxious for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. So Matthew's Jesus, the Jesus that is being portrayed by Matthew, tells his hearers, there's no point in being anxious about tomorrow. There's no point in being anxious at all if you seek God's kingdom and righteousness. The things that you need will be added to you day by day. Hope that was good for you. If it was, you know the stuff to do. And until next time, Charis Kai Reina Humine, grace and peace to you.